to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, and we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up, here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show with a festive theme this week as we head towards Christmas. You can catch the audio from this interview later on SW20 Radio, the new sound of South Wales. That'll be going out next Tuesday at 6 o'clock, where you can catch my show every week with such wonderful guests as my one tonight. But let's not ado, let's go straight into it. My guest tonight has been an impressive 158 credits, according to IMDb. His name, and he has a to his name, and he has a mighty range to boot, from being a performer on a bit of Fry and Laurie to adventures on the high seas in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, from Downton Abbey to 24, from Fleabag to King Lear, from Doctor Who to Doctor Who again. Please welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, Mr. Kevin McNally. How are you?
Hi there. How are you?
Very well. You?
Good, thank you. Yes, keeping well.
I mean, I'm exhausted just after looking through your IMDb of credits. It's been quite a prolific career, sir.
It has. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. About somebody asked me, what is the thing that makes you feel that you're most successful, Pirates of the Caribbean or Supernatural? And I said that I just keep working. That seems to me something that so many actors would love to have, and I feel very honored to be able to have done my job for 40 years.
Well, we were just talking about COVID times before we went live, and by the way, if anyone missed Lawrence's briefing, the gist was there was no party, there was definitely no party, and everything's fine, I believe, was the general outcome of it all. But Kevin, how has this craziest of times been for you?
It's not been too bad. I mustn't complain, actually. Just before lockdown happened, I was thinking to myself that my marvelous voice was not used enough in cartoons and on voiceover. So I'd installed a little bit of professional equipment, which I can show you here, into my study. There's the laundry back there, which I use as buffering, by the way, when I'm recording. So the moment lockdown happened, a lot of production companies were saying, who can record professionally from home? And so I was able to do that. So I did a lot of recording voiceovers for TV shows. And then the rest of last year, as we came in and out of lockdowns and we were able to do a little bit more work, I managed to do a few, both direct and to be in a few short films with young filmmakers that usually I probably wouldn't have been available for. So it was a very creative year, if not a particularly financially satisfying one. And then the moment the new year hit, the disaster of Christmas was over, I haven't stopped really, both here and in the States. So, touch wood, it's all going quite well at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing which I find just wonderful, when an actor is not only very prolific, as we've alluded to, but also works over here in stateside. Is it tough balancing your calendar, traveling between the two?
Yes, it can be a little tiring at times, but just because of the distances involved. And I did recently just go and do a show in New York, and then one in Montana, and then come back to New York. And then I went to a convention in Toulouse in the south of France, and then came home. And then I really needed a couple of days just to lie in bed and watch rubbish on my iPad. But that was great. But I am not complaining, because busy is the best thing, And when you get to my age, you think, well, what do I want to be doing? Do I want to be lounging around, or do I want to get in as many shows as I can before the Grim Reaper comes for me? And the latter is my answer.
Well, we will certainly doubt about your very many credits, but one which you mentioned there, which I did get asked about, which I didn't make any notes for, so I will check this out now, is asking about Supernatural. So such a huge, long-running show and such a big show in scale. What's that like to step into?
Well, it was odd for me because I had when it was brought to me the first episode, and it was only going to be one episode. Um, I had no idea what the show was, and so um, and I didn't have time to research it because I was working at the time. So I went in and did one, and I got a rough idea, and it went quite well. And then they just kept calling me back, and I did about four of them, I think, at the end. But by the end of it, I was in love with it because the guys were great. The two guys are wonderful. They're great scripts, so imaginative. And I suddenly found, having not known about it, that I was going to conventions, and there were, usually for Pirates and my 80s appearance in Doctor Who, or The Spy Who Loved Me, or things like that. And suddenly there was this whole new raft of young people who were massive Supernatural fans, and so that was joyous, really, to accidentally find yourself in another genre franchise.
Yeah, and it's really lovely to see how genre TV is perceived so much better now. It seems like it was kind of looked at as the red-headed stepchild traditionally, and now no one's going to say no to one of those big franchises now.
No, exactly, and I mean, I think it just means that the world of television and film is more inclusive now. I mean, I can remember working when I started with actors who said, maybe a decade before I started working in the early 60s, that they were very worried about appearing on television because it would sort of blight them, as artists. And I think there's always been that. But what is wonderful now is that I think television, as well as having the genre TV shows, because the genres have taken over film so much, the big blockbusters, which I've been as much guilty of as anybody else, it's television now that is telling the big stories, the big arc stories, because a lot of TV shows are basically broken up 10-hour films, So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, the most recent thing I'm sure a lot of us have seen you in would be Doctor Who Flux, which is first time for a long time that Doctor Who's done one of those big arcs like that.
Yeah, it's great. I think it really keeps people. I mean, the problem about Doctor Who is you're always going to have a completely divided audience. There will be people who hate it and people who love it. Personally, my feedback has been exhilarating, and I've reconnected with a lot of Doctor Who fans after my appearance in the 80s, and so really, really enjoyable. And if people don't like it, that's fine, but as long as there is enough people who like it, then it's worth carrying on with, I think.
I mean, as a fan of the show myself, I know personally that the people who love it and the people who hate it is just the fans alone. Like that's the thing with Doctor Who at any given time.
The fan base, yeah, absolutely.
So to take you back a bit, we've spoken a bit about how things have changed over the years, and one thing which occurs to me is now acting and creative pursuits, sometimes government aside, is very encouraged by a lot of people. However, back when you were starting, that wasn't the case. A lot of people were discouraged from going into such an unstable career as it was seen. Were you encouraged when you first started as an actor?
By my parents, yes, they were very very supportive. But of course, the difference is nowadays that when I was starting out in the early 70s, there was an argument that I certainly got from teachers. There was an argument to have, a reliable career, to work on that first, and then they would call the acting a second string to your bow, was the thing that we used to say. Of course, people aren't guaranteed a lifetime career in whatever they choose anymore. It's a much harsher social environment that we work in, and so I think it's as interesting to choose to be an actor or a writer or a director or work in the industry at all as it is to do any other job. My only worry, the only downside that's happened since the early 70s is that there are a number of young people who I think join the industry because they want to be famous, and that seems to me to be disastrous, because it's an ephemera. It doesn't mean anything. It's certainly not achievable just on its own. You can't you probably can be very briefly, but you're not going to make a life out of it. So things have changed 360 degrees since I started. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is that case of, yeah, you can get onto the screen doing that, but can you stay on the screen?
Yes, and also, you know, what is doing that? What does that mean, really? Particularly if people are looking at becoming famous not because of a particular talent, but because of you know, an ability to speak or communicate. My experience of fame has been that it's a very harsh mistress. I'm very lucky. I can walk down the street and not be recognized, and yet I have a fulfilling and successful career. People I know who are very famous have huge caveats about what they're having to trade in for becoming, you know, wealthy or secure or successful. And the problem is with these ephemeral sort of fames is that they don't last. And then where are you? Everybody knows you, but you haven't got a penny to spend. And kids don't realize that everybody knowing who you are and owning your life is not the wonderful thing that you think it is. It's very intrusive, and it's very bad for your mental health.
Yeah, and I think there is so many benefits to being a journeyman actor, if you don't mind that expression.
I love that phrase, jobbing actor.
I think it's wonderful.
Journeyman is particularly poetic, I think.
I think it's wonderful. I think you do end up getting into everyone's favorite shows, but you don't have necessarily the pressure of the lead. You get to go into those shows and appear in so many, so you get more of a breadth of work as opposed to
exactly. Yeah. In fact, no, that's very true. And in fact, a lot of people say to me, you know, what's your favorite job? And I say the next one. That's my favorite job. And I think only by being a journeyman actor, as you say, can you have the joy of being able to say that.
Yeah. So you came from Bristol and you studied in Birmingham, if I'm correct. What was the kind of acting scene like at that time, and kind of going through those places?
Well, I left Bristol when I was about 18 months old, so I don't remember much of that really. Although much later I was accepted into the Bristol School of Speech and Drama, which I didn't go to because I went to one in London instead. But in Birmingham gave me a wonderful break, actually, because the school I went to was very good at drama, very good at, there was two wonderful teachers, Brian Hutton, who's sadly now dead, and Trevor Sandland, who both gave me a chance to do light operetta, actually, which was interesting. Got a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan, which is very sort of up front, performing and singing and dancing and all that sort of stuff. So that was a great help. And then when I was 16, I decided that I wanted to come to London and join the National Youth Theatre. Well, unfortunately, my family wasn't well enough placed to be able to put me up and to give me money to live there, so I couldn't go to that. But that year, two wonderful gentlemen called Derek Nichols and Ray Speakman created the Birmingham Youth Theatre. So fortunately that, you know, in the year that I really wanted to branch out and do something that wasn't schoolwork. And in fact, I'll be going to see them in the new year in their latest production, because I've kept in touch with them, the Youth Theatre. So I was lucky enough to do that. And then the director of the Birmingham Repertory Theatre at the time, Michael Simpson, was having trouble casting some small parts of a young 16-year-old actor, and he happened to come and see the show, and he gave me a chance to go and appear on the professional stage at 16. So Birmingham gave me a hell of a lot, and I only hope it's continuing to keep giving its young artists what it gave me.
I mean, in two ways, that's really nice to hear. One, that any organization people have gone to still survives, especially after the last couple of years. It's not been an easy time for many. And the fact that it's still giving those opportunities to young actors who maybe haven't come from the most affluent backgrounds, which again is a sadly narrowing place to go through.
Well, it is. I mean, when I was at drama school and working in the early 70s, there had been a whole movement since the 60s for, many more working class actors to work. I think, through the sort of social upheavals we've been through, that has narrowed again, and it tends to be only people who, and not, not to criticize any of those actors, but a lot of actors who come up now are people who are, can be bankrolled by their parents, etc. So anything that enables people to be able to do what they do without that sort of background is, in my view, a very good enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be much poorer for it if that does die out, those opportunities for everyone, because, the next Guy Ritchie and the crew which he brought in of brand new actors who'd never been in anything. Some people he just found on the streets and pulled in. Like, I don't know if we get those films again if we stop having those opportunities.
Well, it's a bit like Sam Neill in Jurassic Park. Life will always find a way, and I think talent will always find a way, and people's passion and desire will always find a way. I do quite a bit of teaching now as well, and if I can find any way to make people who are facing difficulties to make their journey towards their dream a little smoother, then I'm fully prepared to pitch in.
I hope from your mouth to God's ears, as they say. I do want to talk about kind of some of the wonderful jobs you've been involved in over the years. So one which you came into when you were quite early on in your career was I, Claudius. And what a stellar cast. I mean, John Hurt, Derek Jacobi, Brian Blessed, Sean Phillips, George Baker, who's from my little area of the world, Patrick Stewart. George. It must have been a hell of a thing to go into, and such a world to go into doing a period piece.
Well, it was extraordinary, really. I left drama school at 19. RADA was only a 2-year course, and I went there when I was 17. And I didn't really know anything about anything. I had a slight flair at acting. So one of my first jobs was this job, I, Claudius. And of course, if you look back at that show now, it was the pinnacle of that particular kind of mixture between screen and theatre acting that is long gone. It's still a masterpiece. 20 years ago, I went to the 20th anniversary of it, and we all were amazed at the quality of it. But of course, for me as a 19-year-old, I remember they used to have a big blackboard in the corner, and they would write up your names and your call times for the next day. And I remember going to the floor manager, as he was known at the time, known as an assistant director now. And I was saying, there's no need to put a time up for me. I'll be here at the beginning of the day and I will leave at the end of the day. And he said, well, why would you want to do that? And I said, I'm seeing all of these actors working. I'm just going to sit in the corner quietly with my script and watch what they do. This is better than 2 years of drama school. So that was the second half of my education, and an extraordinary opportunity to have.
Yeah, I mean, what an acting masterclass. As soon as you said you wanted to sit there from start to finish of the day, I knew the answer straight away.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, even though those actors were to go into so many other things, they were already so well established, so kind of renowned. Just what an opportunity.
Yeah, well, they all were, and I knew them all from other things. Derek Jacobi, for instance, and I remember telling him this in rehearsals, was one of the reasons I realized I wanted to be an actor, because I remember going to see him at the Birmingham Rep in 1971, and he did a famous double bill of one-act plays that Olivier had done maybe 15 years before, which was Oedipus Rex, one of the most dramatic Greek plays you could ever see, and The Critic, which is a restoration comedy, one-act restoration comedy. And to put the two together was just extraordinary. And I told him, it was when I saw that, I thought, that's what I want to do. And I was very lucky that 12 months later, I was appearing on that stage in an extraordinary, series of events through the youth theatre, and as I said before. So I always remind Derek that when I see him, and he said, "So it's my fault that you're an actor."
Well, one of the things which you mentioned earlier was Bond, and you got to be an HMS Ranger crewman in The Spy Who Loved Me. It just has to be like, I don't mean to be sexist about this. I'm sure everyone can dream to be in a Bond film, but it seems to be mainly like young boys who are really enthralled by this when we're kids. It's what we're brought up to love, amongst other things. What was that like to step onto a James Bond movie?
Well, can you imagine? I mean, I had been out of drama school for, I think, 9 months, and I was, I think I just turned 20. And I went into the studios. I got an audition, and I had to show Lewis Gilbert, who I did a film with later, actually, when I was more grown up. And I showed him a picture of me because my head was shaved because of the show I was doing at drama school. And he went, "Yeah, fine, you're one of the crew." I mean, I didn't have a lot to do in it because what he did was he employed a number of actors in case he had to distribute lines. So they would go to... So there were a bunch of extras, and there were a few actors who could take the odd line or the odd action every now and again. And I did get a nice action. Roger Moore threw me a gun, and I killed a man in an orange suit, which I must say was on the edge of the frame. And I didn't see it for 25 years till I got a widescreen television, because I was just off of the pan and scan range of the camera. But what a joy going into Pinewood, seeing that huge set. I'd seen all the Bond films, and I was in a Bond film. I got to talk to Roger Moore. I mean, it was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
I mean, catching a gun and shooting a orange suited man, I think that counts as a stunt, even in a James Bond film.
It does count as a stunt, and I never missed the gun, which was good. Yeah. But the wonderful thing about being a jobbing actor is these things have, that was then 1976. I have recently just come back from Montana, where I realized my 10-year-old dream's ambition of playing the sheriff in a Western. So even at my advanced years now, the business can still throw joy at me, can still throw firsts at me, can still throw something at me that I go, "Oh my God, I've dreamed of doing this all my life." And so from being in a Bond film to being in a Western, that spans 48 years,
It's amazing. And we did talk about the fact that it comes full circle with Doctor Who, for instance.
Yes.
The original one you were in was the Twin Dilemma, the first adventure with Colin Baker.
Yes.
And it was a very interesting decision they made of having that at the tail end of the last series of Peter Davison, which wasn't usually done in that fashion.
All right.
It seems like it was like the last time that the BBC were putting kind of a lot of faith in Doctor Who for a little while there. How was the kind of feeling on set when you were kind of like, with obviously Colin coming into the role as well?
Well, I instantly got on well with Colin. He's a friend to this day, and I loved Nicola. She was just great. And I was obviously thrilled to be in Doctor Who. I must tell you, I have been interviewed about the Twin Dilemma many times, and I always like to put the interviewers at their ease by saying I am fully aware that the Twin Dilemma is regarded as the worst episode of Doctor Who ever made. No,
that's Time Flight, sir. That's Time Flight.
Oh, is it? Okay, it's the second worst episode of Doctor Who ever made. But
I enjoy it.
It was absolutely, it was great for me. I must tell you something that's interesting about the difference between the world now and the world then. I was making a TV series called Diana at the BBC, and obviously, as always, it used to be that it came out. Doctor Who came out on a Saturday night. I think it's a Sunday now.
Yeah.
And it was 6:15, and it was our tea break before we went in to record the show. It was Studio One at the television centre. And I said to somebody, I said, look, I'm in Doctor Who and I haven't got time to go home. Is there a TV here I can watch it on? Well, a search ensued and they discovered that in the BBC television centre, 8 studios of the BBC, you couldn't find a television that received the BBC. And I was unable to watch it. And of course, there was no catch up then or anything. So it wasn't for years later that I actually managed to see the Twin Dilemma when it came out on video. But what an extraordinary thing. They couldn't get the BBC at the BBC in those days.
That does seem a bit bonkers.
Yeah.
We will move on from Doctor Who in a second because, like you say, I assumed you might have been asked about it just the once or twice. However,
a couple of times.
For you, what was the feeling like first stepping onto that TARDIS set? Was it something which mattered to you, and did it feel the same going on to the TARDIS more recently?
Well, they couldn't be more different, could they? Because television in general, there was a revolution in television in the early 80s, led by things like the Far Pavilion's Brideshead Revisited, when they realized that television was going to have to be made more like film and not like theater. So the idea of making drama in a studio on video with multi-cameras is a thing of the past. And actually, when you look at it now, it has a very different and slower energy, but it was a sort of an art form in itself, but it's one that's gone. So to come back to Doctor Who, I came back to basically a film set, not the sort of old studio multi-camera sets that I used to be on. So it was much more exciting, much more exhilarating than that had been. And I have to say I enjoyed it just as much this time as I did the first time. Because I was, I remember at the age of 7 seeing the first episode of Doctor Who live on television. So, it's been part of my life for all those years.
You've not done a bad checklist between like Doctor Who, James Bond. You picked up the classics along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm always aware, I've just done a cowboy. I've desperately got to get into a spacesuit and be in a space film just to tick all the boxes. I think once I play a spaceman, I can happily retire.
Well, I think if you do it on a Marvel as well, that's the modern day kind of like one to add to the list, I think.
I know. I guess so. I might have missed the boat on Marvel, but you never know. There might be some old codger they want in a scene somewhere.
Some classic actor, I like to think of it myself.
Classic actor, yes, absolutely. I'll have to check through my old comics and see if there's anybody like me I can suggest it to Disney.
One thing I do really enjoy from these journeyman actors such as yourself is those shows where it is kind of like about that kind of guest star of the week. So you've got the likes of Z-Cars, Casualty, The Bill, and any number of others that you've been in. Do you enjoy doing those kind of shows where you kind of get to have a spotlight for a week and then move on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done that a lot in the States. I've been in CSI and many shows over there coming in for the week. It's quite pressurized because I know, as being a regular in shows, that I always try to be very inclusive to the person who comes in for a week. And you can go into some shows and that, particularly in America, they're made very fast, so people don't have much time for you. So you've got to be very well prepared.
Yeah.
So it's fun, but it's also very hard work doing that. Funnily enough, there was a lot of chat on social media when I did the latest Doctor Who that did I have the record of somebody who had done Doctor Who, and then it had been a long time before I did another Doctor Who, and for me it was 37 years, and I thought, well, I've got this. Well, it appears, because people are so good at working all this out, that I'm third. There's somebody with 38 years and there's somebody with 39 years. There were a few others they posited, but they'd done something in between, so that doesn't count. It's got to be an actual period of not being in Doctor Who. So I'll take bronze for that.
I must admit, I do find it very interesting when someone returns to the show after so many years, but I never thought to look up the record, so that's interesting to know. Oh yeah, of course. You worked with Rick Mail, the late great now Rick Mail, which is still impossible to say. But on both the New Statesman and Bottom, I just wondered if you had any stories about working with him.
Well, he was great, and he became a great friend, largely because our three children each were all of exactly the same age. So we spent an awful lot of time nursing hangovers at schools at 8 o'clock in the morning, taking our kids to school. He was wonderful. When we did the New Statesman, I didn't really know him, but it was up in Yorkshire, and we shared a car up and down, and we chatted about stuff. And he was quite impressed that when I went in front of a live audience, I wasn't in any way nervous. And he used to call me Icy McNally, because I was not intimidated by an audience. And then I remember after that, I went to see him, and he said, "Oh, come round lots, let's be friends." So that's what he wanted us to do. And then because of that, he said, "It's not a very big part, but it's a sex shop manager." So that has been, that one scene in one show has dogged me for 30 years. It really has. People send me cartoons of it, and it's of course the one line, "I'd rather stick pineapples violently up my rectum," that I get quoted at conventions all the time. So that was great, and we had a big plan actually to do a live stage version of The Odd Couple, me and him. But it was first of all scuppered by his accident, and then by his sad passing.
Yeah, that would have been definitely one to get a ticket for.
I think so. Well, to the end, we were still arguing about who would play Felix and who would play Oscar. I don't think we ever quite worked it out.
Yeah,
he wanted to be Felix, I think.
I could see him doing that. I don't think he got enough credit actually for the amount of range which Rick Mail had. I thought the New Statesman, for instance, had for all its silliness involved, there was so much clever satirical nuggets put in there.
Oh, absolutely. And he was famously brilliant on stage in The Government Inspector. I wish he'd done a little bit more. He did do a bit of stage, but it's a shame he didn't do more. He was a wonderful stage actor, actually.
Yeah. Pirates of the Caribbean, again, I know it's one which will have been asked to death, so I will kind of go over it as quickly and as painlessly as possible.
It's fine.
But what an entrance you had into those films.
The pigs, yes. Oh my God. Well, it was very funny because it was about 2 in the morning, I think, or maybe even just past midnight, I don't know. And they started off with, in the original Pirates Ride, it's a guy with a big hat and very ginger hair sleeping with a lot of small pigs. And we had a lot of small pigs, and they were far too excitable. They were too young and little. And anyway, breakfast was on its way, so they had to go. And then they had some medium-sized pigs who were just as excited as me to be in a major feature film, so they wouldn't settle down. And eventually they brought in these 3 massive pigs who we thought through their obesity would be a little bit more sleepy, but they weren't. So Gore Verbinski, the director, said, "Would you mind staying with the pigs for a while? I'll go and shoot something else. And maybe if it all calms down a bit, they'll go to sleep." So I lay amongst this mud and pig swill for about an hour and a half, singing a song that I had sung to my children when they were very young and wouldn't go to sleep, which goes, "Go to sleep, my piggies, close your pretty eyes. Angels up above you, smiling down at piggies from the skies. Great big moon is shining, stars begin to peep. Ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh. It's time for little baby piggies to go to sleep." So eventually, after an hour and a half, I very quietly sent a message to Gore that the pigs were asleep and we could do the scene. Forgetting that the first thing that happened was Orlando Bloom threw a bucket of cold water over us, and the whole process had to start again. I don't think we got out of there till it started being light. And I stunk to high heaven for 3 days.
Now, I knew about many of your talents. I didn't know it was Kevin McNally, Pig Whisperer, as well.
I am a pig whisperer, yes, yes. I had to learn that very fast.
I think actually those films did. I mean, obviously they were clearly such amazing, such fun, such kinetic films. But I think it benefited over here just because of the British cynicism from not being known so much. It was a ride.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it worked the opposite way in America, is that so many people, certainly of my age and a little bit younger, had grown up with that ride, that they also loved it because of the ride, and we didn't know that. I was mystified when it was presented to me as a pirate film. Apart from the fact there hadn't been a successful pirate film since the 50s, probably Tyrone Power, Errol Flynn, people like that. I was amazed that they were going to do a film based on a ride. It seemed peculiar to me. Also, my daughter had an operation in 1999 on her head, and she couldn't travel in planes. So we went on holiday to the newly opened Disneyland in Paris. And 2 years later, I went out to do this film, and I said, I phoned her up and said, I've got to tell you, all this seems vaguely familiar to me. And she went, Dad, we went on Pirates of the Caribbean ride 4 times. And I went, oh, that's what I remember. Yeah. I have to say, being a bit cynical about whether this would work, the fact that people like Johnny Depp and Jeffrey Rush had signed up for the film, I thought, well, they know a great deal more about film than I do. So perhaps this isn't one to be written off to the, to the DVD bucket. This might actually work. The speed of its success, though, took everybody by surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several British actors who were involved who probably wouldn't have been known that well stateside, who kind of launched careers off this franchise.
Well, me being one of them, absolutely. Yes, I mean, I'd never worked in America before, and suddenly it was all available to me. I mean, it was extraordinary, really. Extraordinary thing to happen to somebody who was in his late 40s, definitely.
Yeah, and am I correct in saying the most films in a franchise that you've been in?
The biggest, yeah, certainly, yeah.
No.
And certainly films. I've done more films in America than I've done here, and a hell of a lot of television, and it's just been, a wonderful sort of late awakening in an old man's career, really.
Fantastic. And speaking of films, I know you must get asked about all the time. Spice World, the movie, of course. I think every single British actor was in that film at the time.
All of them. Well, that was, of course, my very late great friend Bob Spears, who directed that film. And it was very interesting because just before that happened, I was in a theater, I remember, put on my makeup. I was 40 years old. I think I just turned 40. And I thought, I guess I'll never be in a Hollywood backlot now. And I thought, that's a bit of a facer. And the next day I went to my agent, and I hadn't done a film like in 11 years, I think. And I said to my agent, I'm not doing anything until it's movies. And he said, you can't do that. I said, I've got to have one more stab at, having a movie career. And so I did. I didn't work for 5 months, but then Peter Howitt asked me to do a small part in Sliding Doors. And then Bob asked me to do the Spice World. And I just said, yes. I said, I'll do anything in any movie. I was very familiar with the Spice Worlds because my daughter was 15 at the time. So, of course, I knew that. She was actually made an honorary Spice Girl. She was very thrilled. Cheeky Spice, she was called by the Spice Girls. And it was because of that I then, a role came up in Entrapment with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Sean Connery. And because I'd got a couple of credits, I got the role. And because of that, I then did another role and another role. So that when Pirates came around, they sort of went, oh yeah, he does do movies again. Okay, so I got an audition. So it was one of those interesting times that an actor in their life can make a real decision about where they want to go and risk being out of work for a while to change their career a little.
You see, now I've got two questions. Like I found already Spice World, the movie, is great for a trivia question. You just pick any random selection of people who appeared in it and ask what movie it's from. But now I've got a second one. How did Spice the World, the movie, influence the Pirates of the Caribbean movies?
It got Kevin McNally back on the big screen again. There you go.
There you go. One of my favorites of recent years is Life on Mars. I thought that was an absolutely fantastic series, which you popped up in. How was it, and how accurate, as someone who was working the time they set it in, how accurate do you think they got it?
Well, I think very accurate, and I would frequently say to them when they would come up with lines to me, I'd say, you've got to remember that I'm actually the only person here who actually saw policemen in the 70s, okay? And it was a very accurate portrayal, I think, of, well, what policemen in the 70s would have said is, we get it done. You know, what it meant is there was virtually no check on them. If they decided someone was going down, they were going down. I actually watched the G.F. Newman series, Law and Order, as preparation for that. This is a wonderful series that I watched again recently. As the policeman's tale, brief's tale, a prisoner's tale, a real analysis of what the criminal justice system was like in the 70s. Obviously, Life on Mars was a lighter view of that, and a wonderful sci-fi time travel thing involved in it. So I loved being in that. Absolutely adored it.
I mean, I thought what was fascinating about it as well was it wasn't all just blaming that era, so to speak. It was also kind of challenging some of our modern views against the views of the 70s, and have we always gone the right direction, which I found really fascinating about it.
I think it's fascinating to this day. I mean, you know, with sort of woke generation, you know, there's an assumption that everything's better. Well, you only have to look at our government to know that that's not the case. Everything isn't better. So there needs to be in all of these things a more nuanced argument than we have about anything nowadays. It seems to be people shouting from one side of the room to another, which is just pointless, really.
Definitely. I do have to share this comment from the floor. So we've got our friends of the Legend of the Traveling TARDIS who put 6 degrees
hi,
of
guys.
McNally.
How are you?
So we got with that. That will be the new game for this Christmas, I think. Definitely.
6 degrees. Well, if you can't connect yourself to me, you don't have a career. That's what I say.
Yep. I think what also I love about you as an actor is you're one of these actors who always tries to go for, it seems like, a different look in every film. In everything, every film, every TV show, you always look a bit different. You always present yourself a little bit different, which is a wonderful thing as an actor. Downton Abbey was one I was going to ask you about, but there's another one where you kind of like change your appearance. Is that something you're kind of very conscious of doing?
Yeah, I think when I started out, I didn't have a concept of being a leading man or a star. That's not why we started to work, but well, maybe some people did, I didn't. So even from the age of 19, I always was a character actor. You know, I wanted to play different people, you know. And one of the things about one of the woke things that's coming up about can you play anybody other than yourself is troublesome to me, because I don't want to play old straight white guys for the rest of my life. You know, I'd like to play something different, you know. So yeah, so I was always a character actor, and I always look for, you know, not necessarily the limp and the hump, you know. I mean, I'm not nothing as sort of crass as that, but certainly you know, a look or a feel or a voice or an accent or any of that is, you know, fun for me. It's for me, it's what acting's always been about. It's not been about revealing my own soul. It's been about showing my understanding of other people.
One of the few other actors which I think does as well as you, which I interviewed a few years back at CovCon, was Christopher Ryan. There's always a different voice. There's always a different mannerism. And I think you guys don't give yourselves enough credit for how much. Not everyone does that. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, there are people who don't have ears for accents, for instance. I mean, one of the things I did when I went to America, although I've just broken that rule now in this new show that I've done over there, is I always want to play Americans, because my experience had been, it used to be in the 70s and 80s, if you were an English actor in America, you were always persecuting somebody. You were either Roman or a Nazi, you know. So I wanted to play as many interesting roles as possible. So I always try to play Americans in America. But that does require an ear, and it requires a lot of work, because you've got to be convincing in a room full of Americans, you know. So, but that's been very enjoyable journey for me, I must say.
Also, there's nothing more painful when they get an English actor or a British actor working in America, and they get them to do an English accent, and it's like, you know, they know the English accent better than that. They get them putting on this faux, very posh English accent. They get them using words we haven't used here in decades or centuries in some case. It's painful.
Absolutely. And in fact, when you do play English people over there, you've got to make sure that I remember once playing an English person in a script written by an American, saying, I don't just put on the accent, you have to write English vernacular. You can't just write an American script and tell me to do it in an English accent. It doesn't work. You know, it's not the trunk of the car, it's the boot. And if you don't get those things right, then it's just plastering something on an American script, really.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about Downton Abbey. Again, it's like with a lot of these jobs you've done, it seems to just get that slightly different audience from something else you've done. Did you find that when you did Downton, that you had a new group of followers from that?
Yes, of course. I mean, because Downton is, you know, is worldwide popular. In America, of course, it's insane, absolutely insane. And I was asked to do many Downton things over there. Not a particularly pleasant character, but one I enjoyed playing. I actually had a bit of luck, actually, that I was going to be just in season 2 or 3, I can't remember. But unfortunately, the twins playing the young baby that I was trying to grab from the scullery maid, they weren't playing on the day, and so part of my story had to be put into the next season, because they had to wait till the twins grew up a bit and behaved better on set. So thank you to those twins for those extra few episodes of work.
And I should say, the twins he was trying to grab from the scullery maid is not a euphemism for anyone watching. That was just very literal there.
Oh yes, no, please. Yes, they were actually twin children. Yes,
that's how these scandals start.
Yes, I wasn't trying to grab the scullery maid's twins. No,
you've worked with Keith Sutherland on 24 and Designated Survivor. I think one of the great actors of our time. And I mean, 24 just did so much to reinvigorate drama, I think, as well.
Yeah, one of the first of the new TV shows.
Yeah. How was he to work with?
Great. I mean, I met him through a mutual friend in LA, and we got on really well. And so when he came to England to do the last 24 series, he called me up and said, "How would you like to be the guy who gets Jack Bauer?" And I went, "I'd love to be the guy who gets Jack Bauer." He said, "How would you like to be the guy who gets Jack Bauer and it's only one scene?" I went, "I still want to get Jack Bauer." So that was great. And then Designated Survivor came up, and he said, "Would you like to play a part in this?" And so it was, you know, a lovely role as the General Corcoran. So that was nice. He hasn't offered me anything lately, but maybe when he gets back to it, he'll think of me again.
Yeah, well,
he's trying to pursue a music career more than an acting career now, actually.
I mean, look, with your resume, you got Jack Bauer, but can Jack Bauer get you if you're busy when he calls? I'm just saying.
I think I'm going to pretend I'm too busy, just to get him back.
King Lear. Now, I always find it fascinating when actors do these Shakespearean plays, especially the better known ones. How do you inject something new to it? How do you make that script fresh again after all this time? And such a huge part as Lear.
It's a great question. One of the great things is that when I was offered Lear, is I was classically trained at RADA, but when I came out, my forte and what I tended to do was new American plays. I've always been immersed in American theatre, so I don't think I've ever seen a production of King Lear. I knew of it. I don't think I'd ever read the play. So I was in an ideal position to just read the play and respond to it as I did. And that was that I certainly wasn't interested in playing anything regal or, somebody with God-given gifts from God to be a king. I just saw him as a deluded bloke who had really big ideas about himself. So I think that ignorance enabled me to do something a little bit original with the part. But, I don't claim to, I said to a lot of my friends, I don't claim to be the best Lear ever, but I'm damn sure I'll be the funniest. And I did get a lot of laughs, I have to say.
I mean, I know it's peppered throughout kind of some of Shakespeare's other works, but I think it's just the best example of if you've got power but no respect, then the power means nothing. Like, eventually power will fade. And this is what he ends up
And our production was very much about what happens when you mistake other things for love, when you demand love rather than earn love. And what I tried to do was to be a little bit more sprightly at the beginning of the play so that I had somewhere to go. And I was probably a bit too sprightly at the beginning of the play for a man who was, devolving his power and stuff to his daughters. But I also wanted to make sure that that the cruelty at the beginning was as far away from the humanity at the end. And if anybody at the end of the play felt that this poor old man deserved love despite what he'd done, then I felt that that I'd have done, whether it was right or wrong, it was what I wanted to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually, as you're talking about it there, it kind of boils down a lot of the similarities between that and the Christmas Carol for the journey that the protagonist goes on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what actors live for, is a journey. When I read a script, I never really think about how many lines there are or what size part it was. Does it have a journey? Well, a small part with no journey is not interesting. A small part with a journey is better than a big part when you're just the same all the way through. It's the journeys that actors like to, well, certainly I like to perform.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you worked on a lot of comedies over the years. One in recent years, which just made it so huge and very deservedly so, was Fleabag. I think it's one of those ones which I can imagine on the script, you've really got to see it. You've really got to get it. And I don't think everyone necessarily would have. Does that make sense? Was it kind of something which you clicked into? Yeah, because I think on the screen it's amazing, but it's so different and so many different things going on with it.
Well, it was an interesting journey. I was doing Noel Coward's Hay Fever in the West End with Lindsay Duncan, Olivia Colman, and Phoebe, and we all got along really well. And she said to us that she had this show she wanted to do, and could we help her out because she was broke. And so we all chucked in a bit, me and Leslie and Olivia chucked in a bit of money to help her go and take the show to Edinburgh Festival. But then Phoebe would phone me up and say, okay, I've got this thing about an older guy and a younger woman. What do you feel about older guys and younger women, etc., etc.? And I would talk about it, and it was great. And then, she gave us all a signed copy of the book and tickets to the show when they came to London. It was great. I've never seen me 500 quid back, by the way, but there you go. But then the series went on television. Phoned me up and said, I hope you don't mind me asking this, but the bit where in the show she talked about having sex with an older man who goes, you're so young, you're so young, you're so young. She said, you wouldn't come in for the day and do that with me. And I said, I'd be delighted to. It'd be great. Much to the chagrin of my children, who I didn't tell about it, and then suddenly saw it in the show. It's like, oh, Dad, God's sake, stop it. And of course, people come up to me now and say, you're the you're so young, you're so young, you're so young guy. You know, and it's funny how things like that in comedy, things like that, and Mr. Sex from Bottom will live with you far longer than many other jobs that you've done, just because of the sheer fan base, you know.
I feel like there's almost some sort of Shakespearean lesson in that, you know.
Probably, yeah.
You shoot for all this big stuff and it's a sex shop worker. Or...
Yeah, well, for me, it's always about sex. I don't know. Those are the ones that seem to hit home. I don't know. Yeah, it was funny. It was funny. It was very funny to do. We couldn't stop laughing, I have to say.
Yeah. Another one, the again modern day great hit was The Crown, which
oh right. Well, yeah, I went away when it was. I haven't actually seen it, to tell you the truth, that series, because I was so busy. I was in the States working and I couldn't. But I mean, that was funny. That was a role. Naturally, what happens in these shows is that they shoot a lot, and you know they have to try to tell the story of the protagonist. And so a lot of my role went. Actually, it wasn't anything like what I'd agreed to do, but that was fine because I remember the character of Bernard Ingham from the 80s, and I just found him and his voice fascinating. So for me, it was just an exercise in trying to recreate somebody who I remember, really. And I worked very hard on the voice, and it was a shame there wasn't a little bit more of him, but it was still fun to have been in, you know. I mean, I've been in The Crown, hell, you know, I've been in Downton Abbey.
Yeah, another one to tick off the list.
Yeah, exactly. It's box ticking at this point.
As we head towards the end of our hour, you mentioned a show you've been recently working on in America. If you'd like to plug what's coming up next for Kevin.
Well, apart from going to Montana to play my sheriff in my Western film, I must say when I was offered that, I did say, I'm presuming if you're offering me the sheriff at the age of 65 in a Western, I don't make it that very far. And he goes, no, it's real too. You get shot. I went, oh, great. Thank you very much. And then there's another wonderful 6-part series. And one of the reasons I did it was one episode in it. It's Rachel Weisz, who's an actress who I just adore, and now a person who I adore. And it was to play her father. And that's a really interesting project called Dead Ringers, it's called, loosely based on the 1988 film by what's his name?
It's Jeremy Irons in that one, isn't it?
Jeremy Irons in it, but the wonderful, you know, we directed a lot of those weird horror films. David Cronenberg film from 1988. So it's loosely based on that, and looks pretty good to me. So that's the last 2 things I've been doing. Yeah.
Oh, we've got a question again from Christian the Traveling TARDIS. Tell us about Decrypted.
Oh, that was hysterical. They sent me this bonkers mad script and said that there was this bonkers mad character and we could film it all in a day last year, you know, just in between 2 lockdowns. And I just loved it, and I had an absolute ball. We didn't have a lot of time, and it's where I actually I created a phrase I use now for my students, which is rehearsals are for pussies. Let's just turn over. Okay, so we just shot for a day and shot this crazy character, and it's a story about a mad CIA operative communicating from the Pentagon with this group of spies in London to try to capture the man who created cryptocurrency, because he was declared a terrorist by the American government, I think about 4 years ago. And it's bonkers and lunatic, and I loved every second of it. So it's worth catching if you can find whatever platform it's going to be on.
Now, you can stick with rehearsals are for pussies, but other than that, do you have any advice for actors who are getting into it now? As we've alluded to before, I think it is a kind of particularly hard time for a lot of actors to break in. What's the one bit of advice you could give to them?
Well, go and take lots of classes. be very prepared, and then on the day be very flexible. That's the only thing, that's the only practical advice I can give actors, really.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kevin. One of my favorite emails in response to me asking if someone can do it, I just got back sure from you, which is a wonder to get back.
Okay, great.
Just before you go, would you mind just doing a quick ident for the radio station which this is going out on?
Sure. What do you want me to do?
Just SW20 Radio, the new sound of South Wales, if you'd like to put that in a plug with your name somehow.
This is Kevin McNally, and this is SW20 Radio, the new sound of South Wales.
Perfect, sir. Much more velvety than my tone, certainly. Oh, and sorry, of course, because this is going out on radio, in the radio version, is there any a tune, Christmas or otherwise, we can play for you?
Yes. I wish it could be Christmas every day is my favorite Christmas song. Probably only because the move came from Birmingham, which is my hometown. Well, but of course, because of that, I did actually work with Nottingham. So I think the other Birmingham band, Slade, I think those two will do. Any musical song that comes from an artist from Birmingham is all right.
Okay. With me. Well, look, Kevin, for you, we will play them both. So if you're listening on the radio, it's over to I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day. For everyone else watching on the video version, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you again, Kevin. This has been an absolute pleasure for me. Hope you have a wonderful...
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much.
Wonderful last bit of the year. And we will speak to you again, hopefully another time. Take care. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. And in a world where you can be literally anything, people, please be kind.